Welcome to New Nacha Rules, New Risks, what every controller must do now to verify supplier bank details. This is an expert practice presentation brought to you by the Controllers Council. My name is Neil Brown, Executive Director of the Controllers Council. And before I introduce our expert panelists and our partner sponsor, let me share some brief housekeeping items. First, we'll have Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please use your GoToWebinar control panel to ask our experts questions. Next, this webinar is CPE eligible with 4 polling questions, so please answer each poll for CPE or to benchmark your peers. Please allow up to 48 hours to receive your CPE certificates via email. And also regarding CPE, you'll receive a brief survey directly after the webcast, so please complete. And finally, you'll receive a link to this webcast via email in the next 24 hours, so no need for notes or screenshots. With that, I'm very pleased to introduce our partner and sponsor, Vendor Info, part of Financial Operations Networks, FON, that provides specialized self-service vendor portals that bring focused, comprehensive, and timely tools and support for collecting, verifying, and managing vendor information. Vendor Info meets the changing internal and external requirements for security controls, compliance, efficiency, and scalability. FON was founded by the leadership team behind Paytech and the Accounts Payable Network, and has been instrumental in helping thousands of senior finance professionals keep their operations ahead of the risk, efficiency, and cost avoidance curves since 2001. Learn more at vendorinfo.com. And with that, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Phil Benko, Chief Executive Officer of Vendor Info, and Mark Brousseau, President of Brousseau and Associates. Pardon me for that one. Mark, take it away.
Thank you so much, Neil, and thank you all for joining us today. Next slide, please. We're here today because there are 2 very big things happening at the same time. The first, of course, is that bank account change fraud is becoming more sophisticated, more persistent, and more operationally dangerous for controllers at, frankly, all size of organizations. At the same time, Nacha, the National Automated Clearinghouse Association, they've raised expectations for how it is that bank account details should be validated and monitored and reported on. Now, individually, each of these trends is daunting enough, but together, well, they require a real, what I'd call a rethink in how it is that bank account validation works, not in theory, but in everyday operations. And that's what we're going to talk about today. By the end of today's webinar, we're going to help you walk away with 4 important things. First, a clearer understanding in how it is that modern bank account change fraud actually works. We're going to provide you with a practical view of what those new Nacha expectations require. We'll give you visibility into where it is that legacy bank account verification methods probably are creating risk for your organization. And finally, we're going to give you a realistic roadmap for modernizing validation without, well, blowing up your AP operation. Before we do any of that, we wanted to start with a poll question. Next slide, please, which is about to be displayed on your screen. We want to know, how confident are you that your current bank account change controls would stop a sophisticated fraud attempt? How confident are you that your current bank account change controls would stop a sophisticated fraud attempt? Are you very confident your controls are strong and they're consistent? Are you somewhat confident, but you rely on some manual steps? Are you not very confident? There's some gaps that frankly keep you up at night? or are you not confident at all? This is a big concern. Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen. We'll discuss the results in just a moment. Phil, you go into a lot of finance departments. What's the thing you most commonly see in accounts payable that makes you cringe the most when it comes to fraud and security?
Uh, it's a great question. I'd say, Mark, the most cringeworthy is when we hear that people are telling us that they're validating bank accounts with their vendors uh, through email. And they say, well, we send an email back to somebody who we know at the vendor, and we ask them to verify that this was really a legitimate request. And the challenge there is that most all change request frauds are perpetrated through an email, the vendor's email system, which has been compromised by a bad actor. And if the email system is compromised, then using email to try to validate it is basically giving the gun back to the burglar. It's we don't see this as much, but we still see it. We see it when we talk to people. We see folks doing it, and they're telling us they're doing it, and we have to be careful. We really have to be careful because we certainly don't want to anger them by telling them that that's actually a worse practice. Most folks have moved to trying to do it over the telephone, which has problems of its own that I know we'll talk about later.
We asked our attendees, how confident are you that your current bank account change controls would stop a sophisticated fraud attempt? 20% of our attendees, well, you're very confident. You believe your controls are strong and they're consistent. But look at this. 60% of you are somewhat confident. You admit that you still rely on some manual steps. And we know that each one of those manual steps introduces opportunities for fraud. 17% of you are not very confident. You know there's gaps that are keeping you up at night. And 3% of you, you're not confident at all. This is a known concern. Put it all together, 80% of our attendees, Phil, are not very confident in their controls for stopping a sophisticated fraud attempt. Does this surprise you?
Definitely appreciate the candor of the folks who answered the poll. Most of the folks who we talked to have not taken steps that they're completely comfortable with in order to fully prevent making payments to the wrong entity. And that's certainly something that vendor info addresses quite strongly. But we're seeing this, and I think part of it, Mark, is because while the fraud attempts have been gaining steam over the last several years, they're really accelerating at this point because of the new technologies that are being deployed by the perpetrators.
Yeah, understand why so many of you are less than very confident in your controls. We probably need to start with how it is that fraud itself has changed. Fraud isn't new, obviously. It's just the way that the fraudsters are going about perpetrating it is new. Next slide, please. Today's fraud, well, it's not as opportunistic as check fraud in days of past. It's really well organized. In fact, in many cases, these frauds are being committed by large organizations. In some cases, they're being financially backed by rogue nations. One recent fraud ring that was broken up had an HR department to recruit fraudsters. They had 500 employees, a marketing department to sell their ill-gotten data. This is what we're up against. And your AP teams are being targeted, frankly, because they're trusted, they're busy, and they're operationally critical. The fraudsters know that they're sitting on your payments. Just one successful bank account change can trigger multiple fraudulent payments before anyone realizes what's happened. And the problem is that these attacks are escalating. They're not slowing down. Each year in the United States, more money is lost to business email compromise than to bank robberies. I know. Bank robberies are far more interesting than BEC attacks, but this is the reality in which we're working. And ladies and gentlemen, you knew it wouldn't take long for me to say this, but artificial intelligence has fundamentally shifted the landscape. AI has removed many of the red flags that controllers used to rely on to be able to stop fraud in its tracks, right? We all used to receive those emails from the Nigerian prince who wanted to wire us $2 million. All we had to do was give him a credit card number or our bank account details, and everything would be underway. Well, today AI is far more nefarious, far more insidious. AI generated emails and even videos and phone calls now can mimic the tone of actual vendors, of actual coworkers, maybe our own CFO or CEO. These messages are personalized and they're context aware. So in many cases, a fraudster will hack into a supplier's email. They'll be able to see how it is that they interact with their counterparts at AP departments from their buyers, and they'll weave those interactions into the actual email. So for instance, if they have conversations about a certain football team, those might be dropped into these AI generated emails. The problem is that a lot of the telltale signs and red flags are harder to discern, particularly if we're not training our AP staff on what to look for. And forget about manual detection being able to identify these things. It's just too hard these days. So next slide.